Dwight David Howard, or as he was called throughout his NBA career, Superman. The #1 overall pick of the 2004 NBA draft class, owner of 3 DPOY titles, 8-time All-Star, 8-time All-NBA member, 5-time All-Defensive member, 5-time rebounding champion, 2-time block champion, and finally, in the twilight of his career, a 1-time NBA champion with the Los Angeles Lakers. However, after the 2021-22 season, he is currently out of an NBA job and playing in Taiwan and possibly not getting another NBA opportunity. However, Dwight Howard's career has come with a lot of questions. Why is he out of the NBA? Why isn't he in the NBA's top 75 players list of all time? Why did he go into a carousel of teams in the second half of his career? And finally, the most funny one of me of all time, why does DeAndre Jordan have a job in the NBA but not Dwight Howard? We're not answering that one, by the way. I just laugh every time I see that question on the internet. But anyways, Dwight Howard was meant to do way more in his NBA career than he already has done. But after his stint with the Houston Rockets, he went into obscurity for the most part and slowly became less and less relevant of a player. But why? Well, that is something we'll be studying in this video in 3 parts. First, his time in Orlando that made him the player that he was. The second, what I'll call his last chances in the NBA in LA and Houston. And finally, the journey across the NBA he had in his 30s. Just like in the Carmelo case study video, you're going to want to stick around for this one as we try to crack how Dwight Howard became so obscure in the NBA after his peak and received less notoriety for his career in general. So if you want to see more videos like these, be sure to like the video to show your support and subscribe to be notified when new videos come out. But as usual, this will be a long one, so you already know who it is. Roll it!
3, 2, 1.
Weights in the weight room, so he stitched up in the left.
But before we start today's video, as a person who loves cooking and showing off my creations online, I can't wait to tell you about today's video sponsor, Factor. With Factor, you are given ready-to-cook meals to your doorstep with an assortment of 27 meals and the option to add on 34 additional add-ons for a wide array of meal ideas, and you never have to have the same meal over and over again. And with how fast life is, you can enjoy more time doing what you love while being healthy with the guarantee that every meal that Factor gives you will be of premium quality, no more meal prep, no more dishes, and no more unhealthy fast food. But don't worry for the people who have a particular diet plan. They offer keto, calorie smart, vegan, and vegetarian meal options with Factor's meal plans ranging from 4 to 18 meals per week, and you can add on more or reduce the number depending on your specific needs, and you can easily modify food preferences and skip a week if needed. And if all that sounds like something you'd be interested in, try out Factor with a 50% discount on your first order today with my link in the description and use my code on the screen to take advantage of today's deal. Again, use the code on the screen, in the link in the description, or the pinned comment with Factor to enjoy all the benefits of Factor and a 50% discount on your first order. Thank you for Factor for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back into it.
With the first pick in the 2004 NBA draft, the Orlando Magic select Dwight Howard from Southwest Christian Academy.
Remember, some of the reaction in the house will be from Connecticut fans who are from just a couple of hours away. And as you would expect, first class of Mecca Okafor with a handshake there for Dwight Howard, who becomes the 3rd high school player taken #1 overall in the last 4 years of the NBA draft. Kwame Brown with Washington. And of course, last year, LeBron James, Cleveland. And now 18-year-old out of Southwest Atlanta Christian High School, Dwight Howard, taken by the...
Drafted with the first spot of the 2004 NBA draft, the Orlando Magic put the keys of the franchise into the hands of the 18-year-old and top recruit of the 2004 high school recruiting class, Dwight Howard. Before he was even drafted, the Magic was still being led by Tracy McGrady, who, despite leading the NBA in scoring, also owned the worst record in the NBA, which gave them that pick. But as you can imagine, T-Mac left that offseason for Houston via trade, so it left Dwight Howard as the sole building block on the team to work with other people on the team, like, and in his prime, Steve Francis, a 32-year-old Grant Hill, and some names you'll hear later in this video, and rookie Jameer Nelson, and a 25-year-old Hedo Turkoglu. And as the starting center in his rookie season, he already showed the the NBA with some time to mature his then 18-year-old body, he became a force to be reckoned with, averaging an already double-double as an 18-year-old with 12 points, 10 rebounds, and 1.7 blocks a game, which put him top 20 in the league, showing his promise as a defensive anchor. And remember, he already had big shoes to fill in his position as #1 overall draft pick center for the Orlando Magic, taking the role of the last one in Shaquille O'Neal. But as he got bigger, older, and stronger, the NBA game came easier for the young Dwight Howard, to the point to where he made his first ever All-Star game at the age of 21, averaging 17 points, 12 rebounds, and 1.9 blocks a game in his 3rd year in the league. But going into next year, you can say the best thing to ever happen to Dwight in his NBA career came to him in the form of the newly signed head coach, his 4th in 3 seasons, Stan Van Gundy. Going into the 2007-08 NBA season, the Magic were just coming off a first-round sweep to one of the rulers in the Eastern Conference, the Detroit Pistons. However, with a well-needed change looming in the horizon, the Magic decided to act upon that and sign Stan Van Gundy, who had had a very short NBA career at that point, where the only experience that he had was working with the Miami Heat as an assistant until he got the head coaching job in the 03-04 season, the season D-Wade got drafted. However, only lasted 2 seasons and some change after Stan left the team in a very interesting manner. I'd explain it here, but this is a video about Dwight. Just know that he left the same year the Heat won the championship against the Mavericks. But with the Magic, he was able to incorporate Dwight Howard in a system that would open up more opportunities for him to score in the paint and off of lobs, and also open up the space on the court to let his shot creators do what they wanted to do without interference from other defenders. And yes, this sounds exactly as you'd imagine, a modern day basketball team in its primitive form in 2007. You had the mighty Dwight Howard as the anchor of the defense and able to do whatever he wanted in the paint, while he had shooters from the 1 through 4 spot doing what they did best, shooting and just putting the ball in the basket. In Stan's first season alone, they improved their record from 42-40 to 52-30 and made them the 3rd seed. And at the same time, they averaged the most made threes in the NBA with 9 a game and 2nd in attempts with 25 a game, while also being top 10 in offensive and defensive rating. But this also benefited Dwight greatly, with his coaching change allowing him to average career highs in scoring with 20 a game, made him the league leader in rebounds with 14.2 a game, and same with blocks at 2.1 a game, that made him 5th in the NBA. And as you can imagine, gave him another All-Star berth. And finally, this is where Superman was born in the 2008 NBA Slam Dunk Contest.
Superman in the building. Yeah, Superman cape.
Superman is in the building.
Oh, he's going to put it on, right?
Superman is in the building. Yes, he is. Clark Kent, he's winning the phone booth and he comes out and Superman has came to the building. He's got the cape moving. He's got it flapping. Oh, my gosh. Oh, you win, young fella. You win. Superman. Da, 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 da. Superman is here. Oh my goodness. He is. Oh, they're playing the music. They're playing the music. Oh my goodness. Oh.
A 2nd straight 50.
That is incredible. Are you kidding me? Do you see this? He didn't just dunk it. He threw it through. He threw the ball.
So in that season, he was able to meet his best coach in his career at that point to have team success, had his best season in his career at that point, and win his one and only dunk contest of his career, putting his name Superman on the map. And despite losing in the 2nd round to the Detroit Pistons, the same team that they lost to that last year in a full 1 gentleman sweep, there was optimism everywhere that this Orlando Magic team could make it to the promised land off the coaching strategy of Stan Van Gundy, the dominance of Dwight Howard, and the supporting cast around him.
Pardon me. Excuse me. Pardon me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Pardon me. Excuse me. Hannah, are you okay?
I think so.
What happened?
Well, I was making a cup of coffee. I pressed a button, and the machine caught on fire. And then out of nowhere, Superman swooped in and put it out. Yeah, you should have seen him. He was amazing.
Wow. You're really lucky Superman was so close by.
The 2008-09 NBA season. This season was Dwight's 5th. However, it was only the beginning of what Dwight Howard had planned for the NBA. After a full season of garnering chemistry with his core, it was time for the Orlando Magic to try and go after every NBA's player final goal, to win an NBA championship. And the road to that route was going to be hard as any road to an NBA championship. The Orlando Magic was able to once again improve on their last season, going 59-23, which again made them the 3rd seed. But on that regular season journey, the young Dwight Howard was able to take things to another level, finally receiving his first of 3 straight Defensive Player of the Year awards. And in this season in particular, he was the youngest player to ever win it at 23 years old. Because Dwight Howard went and averaged 20 points, a league-leading 13.8 rebounds, and a league-leading 2.9 blocks a game. And due to that, he also led the Magic to the best defensive rating team in the NBA and allowing the least amount of points in the paint in the NBA. But going into the NBA playoffs, they were going to be faced with some tough opponents in every round, and they already lost Jameer Nelson, their starting point guard, due to injury before the playoffs even started. First, they faced the young and scrappy 76ers team, beating them in 6 with only 2 instances of the team scoring over 100 points or more. In the second round, they had the Celtics, who even without Kevin Garnett still took them to 7 games, in which the Magic had to win 2 straight, being down 3-2. And finally, their toughest opponents in the Cleveland Cavaliers, who own the best record in the NBA and the MVP of the season, LeBron James. However, unfortunately for the Cavaliers, they had zero answer for Dwight Howard in the post, who went to average a dominant 25 points a game on 65% for the field, and even finished the series with a 40-point bomb on the Cavaliers on 14-21 shooting. But to the Cavaliers' credit, they kept up as much as they could, with LeBron James averaging 38 points a game on 48% shooting from the field and owning a game-winning shot in Game 2 of the series.
The ball. Lewis gets it to LeBron for 3 for the win. Yes! LeBron James at the buzzer as the Cavaliers have pulled it out to tie the series, and what a miraculous shot by James!
But if you thought the 2 series before that was hard, no, you haven't seen anything yet. The Magic had their hardest opponents ahead of them in the finals, who were the 2nd best team in the NBA, the Los Angeles Lakers, led by Kobe Bryant and Pau Gasol, who were just in the finals last year. And this series in particular would be where Dwight would meet his best front court he'd have to go against all playoffs, and Pau Gasol, Andrew Bynum at the center spot, and Lamar Odom off the bench. And in an interesting 5-game series, the Lakers were able to make a somewhat easy work of the Magic, and it started off with neutralizing Dwight Howard, making him only score 15 points a game in that series while shooting under 50%. But to his credit, he did average 4 blocks a game in the series. But offensively, the Magic couldn't get anything going against the 6th best defense in the NBA, and a super motivated Kobe Bryant looking for his first championship since splitting up with Shaquille O'Neal in the early 2000s. So with that series over and done with, the Magic made it all the way to the finals to get routed by the Lakers, and it was back to the drawing board. But as we all know, that would be the peak of Dwight Howard's time with the Magic.
Gatorade Product Analysis O2 Perform. It initiates rehydration and sustains performance so you can finish strong. The original Gatorade, part of the G series.
So after the rise of Dwight Howard's time with the Magic, the next few years with him still came with mighty highs for his individual career. But when it came to the team success on the Magic, it never got as good as what they did in the 2008-09 season. Going into the 2009-10 season, Dwight still went and averaged a league best in rebounds and blocks and led his team to a 59-23 record, which was 2nd best in the East. They even added a 33-year-old Vince Carter to add more offensive versatility to the team after trading away Hito Turkoglu. And again, Dwight put up another amazing season, winning his 2nd straight DPOY award. But coming into the playoffs, they were seen as easy favorites due to what they did to the Cavaliers the year before, and them still having no answer for Dwight in the paint. And as they swept the Bobcats and Hawks, it seemed really valid that they can go on and go back to the finals. But when they met up with the Boston Celtics in the conference finals for a potential rematch with the Lakers, the Magic just could not stop Paul Pierce, who nearly put up a 50-40-90 shooting split numbers, scoring 25 points a game in that series also. And with the added fact that the Celtics were up 3-0 in the first 3 games, and finally they ended up finishing the job in game 6, keeping the Magic down to only scoring 86 points in that final game. And next year, it was more of the same. 52-30 record, another DPOY award for Dwight, and this time around, scoring a career-high 22 points a game. But that was because the Magic were slowly crumbling, losing more and more of what made them so elite in the first place. Adding Jason Richardson via trade for Vince Carter and Marcin Gortat, and trading away Rashard Lewis for a broken-down Gilbert Arenas, who ended up getting the amnesty clause used on him. But while they were still able to stay above water in the regular season, the postseason was a different story, losing to the 5th seed Hawks, who they swept last year. And nobody could blame it on Dwight, as he scored 27 points a game in that series, and even scored 46 points in their first game, even though it ended up in a loss. No, the problem was, again, the breaking down of that core and the lack of scoring anywhere, with the second best scorer on the team in that series being Jameer Nelson, who scored 13 points a game on 37% from the field and 23% from 3. And after another underwhelming season with the Magic going 37-29 in the lockout year and losing to the Pacers in 5 while Dwight was injured, that became the final season Dwight would ever play with the Magic. But before we get into how he departed from the Magic, we have to talk about the interesting relationship between Stan Van Gundy and Dwight Howard during the lockout year, and it all started with this very infamous and interesting clip.
Man, how do you know it's true?
I was told it was true by people in our management, so, you know, right from the top. So.
What did management tell you? Are they going to stand behind?
They haven't told me anything, and they don't need to. I mean, I'm the coach right now, and, you know, I'm the coach until they decide I'm not the coach. They don't need to tell me anything, you know, and I don't expect them to tell me anything. What I expect is that we play better defense tonight. I mean, you guys think that stuff's crazy, but that's honestly the truth. I mean, the rest of it, I said this before. I mean, I don't care about that stuff. If they want to, you know, it's 12:02 right now. If they want to fire me at 12:05, I'll go home and find something to do. I'll have a good day. I'm not worried about.
What is your sense of when you talk to management? Will they listen to him, or will it be a management?
Oh, I have no idea. They can. Well, obviously, it'll be a management decision. They have to make the decision, but I ain't worried about that. So.
Excuse me. Yeah, Stan, we're not worried about that, right?
That's what I just said. We got to be worried about winning games.
Yeah, what's our main concern right now? Jameer.
We have to stop Carmelo Anthony and the New York Knicks tonight.
And the New York Knicks.
That's exactly right.
That's the plan, right?
That is the plan. That's what I just said.
Is Dave Ping here today? The guy who started this BS?
I don't see Ping here.
Me neither.
Are you guys done with me?
Yeah.
Let's all
you can talk to him now.
All right.
Dwight, are the stories true about? Come on, man. Yeah, the stories from Dave Ping.
This is what people call, to this day, one of the most awkward sports interviews in history. Stan Van Gundy was made aware that Dwight Howard wanted him gone going into the next season, and as he was answering the media honestly, as he usually does, Dwight comes in and denies it fully. But would you like to know that the rumors are absolutely confirmed, as in a 1v1 interview with ESPN's Hannah Storm, it was again confirmed by Dwight Howard himself. And in some ways, I can't blame him. After making the finals in your 5th season, you then drop off every season after the point with the team, not himself, as you watch your organization butcher your team little by little from the core that worked in the first place. But I'd say that's more of a management issue than on the coach, who is trying to do what he can with what he has. But as we all know, in the NBA sphere, the coach is usually the scapegoat automatically. But on July 1st, 2012, with one more year left on his deal, Dwight Howard requested a trade from the Orlando Magic, with his main destination of interest being the Brooklyn Nets, but other teams in the Rockets and Lakers who wanted him also. And Dwight made his situation even worse publicly, saying that if he didn't get traded to a team that he liked, he'd simply move on for that team after he was traded and go to another team after his contract was done. The Dwight Mare, the media called it, was truly a saga to watch in full swing in the offseason, and came with many different main points that ended up narrowing down the options of where he ended up playing in the future. The Nets were initially interested in him, but due to the drama with Dwight and management, the Nets ended up just trading for Jazz star Darren Williams instead, which left Houston and LA. And for Houston, they weren't willing to add another team or give up too much draft capital, which means the winner ended up being the Los Angeles Lakers, the team Dwight publicly said he didn't want to go to and would leave at first chance. So with that context bringing up to this current point, it's time to introduce the second chapter of Dwight Howard's interesting career.
It has been developing for months. Breaking news tonight here on SportsCenter. And it looks like Dwight Howard is on the move, a deal that just really came about over the last couple of hours. Howard going to the Lakers, and Denver getting Andre Iguodala, Philadelphia getting Andrew Bynum. Those are really the big parts of this deal. The Magic, Aaron Aflalo from Denver, along with Al Harrington and his contract. So there are the pieces right now in this 4-team deal, and there are some draft picks there as well.
On August 10th, 2012, after a long, agonizing summer dealing with Dwight in Orlando and trying to find a suitable trade for the organization, a final trade was made in a 4-team move. But the main pieces moving was Dwight to LA, Andrew Bynum to Philadelphia, Andre Iguodala being traded to the Nuggets, and a lot of draft capital. But this was also Dwight's make or break season. It had a lot of potential to go completely right and boost his name to the top big men of the decade and potentially all time, or could fail horribly and he'd have to try to find himself a suitable team in the summer to try to get back up to that point. Because think about it, he is joining a Lakers team with a still top of his game Kobe Bryant, had a front court mate in Pau Gasol who still had a couple of good years left in him, Ron Artest / middle world peace, whatever you want to call him, who is still one of the better role players in the NBA, and finally also joining him would be Steve Nash, who was traded from the Suns, and even though he is still functioning like a current day Chris Paul, he can still come and facilitate your offense at a top tier rate. But for Dwight personally, he would have to deal with his own consequences of his actions, as after his April surgery to his back, he would then take a 6-month break out of basketball to, I guess, heal and get back into shape. But unfortunately, that isn't what he'd do, as he came into training camp in the preseason out of shape and started off the season that way also. Now, we already know about the struggle that was that Lakers season that year, with Pau Gasol and Steve Nash missing significant time, the coaching problem they had going through 3 in the season with different ideologies, and finally, Kobe Bryant's injury that basically shut down the Lakers season as they got swept in the first round by the Spurs as the 8th seed. So instead of talking about all of that happened within the season with other people, let's talk about Dwight's time in particular with the Lakers management and players instead of talking about, again, his individual season. So even with his setback after his surgery during the offseason, Dwight Howard was still able to use his body to average 17 points, a league-high 12.4 rebounds a game, and even block 2.4 shots a game. Unfortunately, playing with Kobe Bryant meant that he was going to be expected the absolute most out of him, being the young star joining a partly established team in the Lakers and looking to go and take over the reins for the rest of the core as they got older. But between himself and Kobe, their relationship was never the best, according to reports and, well, themselves. According to an article made by SB Nation, Kobe himself was quoted to say, "I tried teaching Dwight, I tried showing him, but the reality is we have a perception of what it is to win a championship, and most perceptions of what it's like to win are a very outgoing, very gregarious locker room where you pick each other up and you're friends all the time." That's the perception. And I think that's what his perception was of what the idea is. But when he saw the reality of it, it made him uncomfortable. And it's very tough to be able to fight through that, to deal with that challenge. I don't think he was willing to deal with that uncomfortable and combative nature. And that's exactly the problem. Dwight Howard was the leader of his team in Orlando, where he set the tone, and that tone was very laid back. And as we can all imagine, because Dwight Howard is a very fun-loving and goofy guy off the court. But for Kobe Bryant, who was raised within the sport, it was made for mentally and physically. You can see the clear culture clash between the two and how it would make for a very hostile environment and a very hostile relationship between the two. Think about it like this: the relationship between Kwame Brown and Michael Jordan earlier in the 2000s. One was a rising star, at least thought to be one, who was looking to be better, and the other was a person who was out of his prime and had plenty to teach him to be great and to carry the torch for the team. But both came with entirely different places, which caused a negative effect rather than a positive. In coaching, you have to realize that even though you're dealing with athletes, they all are human beings, and all human beings react to different scenarios differently than others. So while Michael Jordan failed with that Kwame Brown not knowing how to do it the right way, Kobe did the same with Dwight. But even years later, Dwight rejects that notion about the dynamic between the two. But I will give him credit that even while he was not at his best form physically, he was still able to go out there and produce pretty well while not being the focus point of the offense. Dwight in that season still played like himself in Orlando, but obviously just with less looks. Because on a team of that caliber, somebody has to take a tiny backseat with a little less production and a little less looks in the offense. But at the end of the season, where Dwight was finally an unrestricted free agent, free to go wherever he wanted, there was still drama on the team with himself and Kobe Bryant. Dwight Howard, despite the season that just went down, was still willing to stay with the Lakers. However, on one condition. Kobe Bryant had to receive the amnesty clause, turning 35, still having a few more years left on his contract, and is now out for the whole season due to his injury, which would clog up salary for the team and to get help for Dwight. According to Slam magazine, there was reported to say per ESPN, sources said that Howard and his representatives in a handful of meetings with Lakers officials before he became a free agent on July 1st strongly suggested the center would have a difficult time re-signing with the team if Bryant stayed with the franchise beyond the 13-14 season, the final year of his contract. The Lakers, almost from the moment Howard arrived in August 2012, had gone to great lengths to assure the 27-year-old that they saw him as the face of the franchise and that the torch would be passed from Bryant to him in short order. But with Bryant saying publicly just a week before free agency that he was thinking of playing at least 2 or 3 more seasons, it was hard for Howard to envision when he would assume that role. And as the report said, Dwight was willing to stay, but Kobe had to be off the books of the Lakers before he signed. And with the organization saying no, on July 13th, the still in his prime, 28-year-old Dwight Howard signed with the Houston Rockets, ending off the weird saga that was supposed to be with himself on the Lakers potentially joining the short list of all-time centers in the purple and gold, but now would end up being broken up due to a weird season, a feud with Kobe Bryant, and the organization siding with their longtime superstar over Dwight.
First of all, Dwight Howard was leaning towards going to Houston long before the season had come to an end. If you remember, on several occasions, even though I left out hope for the Los Angeles Lakers because of that additional $30 million that was on the table, I was on the record saying that Houston had a better than 50-50 chance of doing this, and I thought he would go to Houston simply because, number one, when the season, 5 games into the season, when Jim Buss elected to let go of Mike Brown, I pointed out how Dwight Howard had asked for Phil Jackson and was rebuffed. Then as the season progressed and they struggled, and that kind of heat he was experiencing, that didn't help. Then there was some friction at one time, at least earlier on, between him and Kobe Bryant before that ultimately was resolved. Then after that, near the tail end of the season, Mike D'Antoni and the frenetic pace that he likes to play at, even though he had modified that to some degree, basically said, I'm the coach, you're the player. Because Dwight Howard wanted them to throw the ball inside more, and D'Antoni had not elected to do that until he absolutely had to once Kobe Bryant went down. So for an organization and a team that was looking at Dwight Howard as the future, saying he was the heir apparent to the Kobe Bryant era, clearly they didn't take that too seriously because they weren't doing much to appease him. Having signs embarrassing themselves, by the way, by having signs talking about please stay and all of that stuff. I mean, talk about really belittling yourself and lowering yourself to sub-Laker standards. That's what they did all in of themselves. But ultimately, it came down to this. Dallas was never a viable candidate. That was just a gratuitous interview that was granted. The same thing could be said for the Atlanta Hawks. They never had a chance, okay? The Golden State Warriors had creeped up into things because obviously they could unload contracts and ultimately get him and pair him with a guy like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Harrison Barnes. But in the end, it came down to the $30 million extra or the Houston Rockets. And James Harden had been working Dwight Howard all season long. They've been spending a lot of time together throughout the last month. Throughout the month of June, they were seen together, all of this other stuff. So it was pretty much a foregone conclusion. But ultimately, what it came down to is this. I asked Dwight Howard this question when he called me on vacation and asked me to report that he definitely, quote him as saying he's going to the Houston Rockets. I said to him, if Phil Jackson were the coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, would you be leaving? His answer was a flat-out no. I would be staying with the Los Angeles Lakers. That's not to say that at one time or another there wasn't friction with him and Kobe, even though that wasn't really the factor in the end. That's not to say he has anything personal against Mike D'Antoni, because he doesn't. Actually, most people consider Mike D'Antoni a relatively decent man. You have all of that stuff going on. But in the end, what it comes down to is the direction of this franchise moving forward. Without Phil Jackson, you have to have faith in Jim.
And now, another new chapter of Dwight Howard's career. For competing for championships and top seeds in the East, and then a little detour in LA, he now shows up in one of his desired destinations in Houston. Why? Well, in Houston, he would be joining another elite player in James Harden, who is of similar age to him and could produce on one of the most lethal pick and roll duos in the NBA, and also joining a team with a lot of upside that him joining could take this team to the top. In NBA history, there have been a lot of great guard center duos that have made it to the promised land, and well, Dwight saw Harden as the guard that can compete with him as a player and make his job easier offensively. And the perfect third reason that tied in greatly to why he potentially signed with the Rockets was the fact that they thrived off their space, shooting the second most threes in the NBA, and primarily played small ball to allow Harden to do what he needed to do. And now with Dwight, it basically emulated what happened in Orlando, a system that he thrived in for years, and it seemed to be a match made in heaven, averaging another high side double-double with 18 points, 12 rebounds, and almost 2 blocks a game, being the second leading scorer on the team, which seemed like the best case scenario, as James Harden averaged a then career high 25 points a game. And even though they ended up being eliminated in the worst way possible via a game-winning Series 3 from Damian Lillard, just like the old days in Orlando, you knew this team had more potential once they got their chemistry rolling and added a few more pieces towards their system. And that's exactly what ended up going down next year. The peak season of Dwight's time with the Rockets, going all the way to the Western Conference Finals with a 56-26 record, owning a top 10 defense and adding pieces towards the future success of this team. And they did this with Dwight Howard missing 41 games due to injury. Unfortunately, they lost to the eventual champions Golden State Warriors. However, there was still optimism they could topple the Warriors in the right circumstances. However, in the 2015-16 season, things were interesting in Houston, to say the least. James Harden punched his ticket into superstardom and averaged 29 points a game that season. However, it led Dwight to only averaging 13.8 points that year, the lowest points per game total he had since his rookie season, and also put up his lowest usage rate since, again, his rookie season. Now more than ever, he was not the focal point of the offense, and that caused problems in Houston. And guess what? It was due to the fact that Dwight Howard wasn't involved enough in the offense to the extent that he wanted to be or he expected to be since signing in Houston, which is interesting considering you're playing with a guy you knew who had superstar potential written all over him from day one of meeting him, but he expected a different reality within that he actually got in the end. But if you want a better explanation, let me read you again a short line from an article from Clutch Points. The thing is, Howard has never really been that guy. Even during his peak leading the Orlando Magic to the finals back in 2009, Howard was the product of a system, setting screens and rolling to the rim with an occasional post-up sprinkled in. For a long time, Howard has been one of the most athletic centers in the league, but his array of post moves have consisted mostly of soft lefty hooks and rumbles to the rim. It's on teams and coaches to do a better job of getting efficient finishers like Howard more looks. That's never been a bad thing. What's different with Howard is his on-court demeanor doesn't seem to match these comments of happiness about a lack of touches. He should be demanding on the court, not off of it. Now, two major things can be said here. Firstly, talking about his actual game in a nutshell, as Dwight Howard was more of a threat in Orlando due to the system ran by Stan Van Gundy, opening up opportunities for Dwight to have an easier time at the rim, and it also opens up again, just like his time in LA, Dwight's lack of professionalism as an athlete in the NBA. Now that's something that could have been fixed years ago and could have made him more happy and should have been told to Harden, and more of a better relationship could have been made from it. But instead, due to him never saying anything, and ended up just bottling all up until the end of his career with them, hitting career lows in his third season in Houston. But due to that, the Rockets went 41-41, their worst record in their time together, and ended things off with a first-round exit to the Golden State Warriors, again, who made easy work of them. So in that 3-year run completed, and with a 1-year period with the Lakers also concluded, what have we learned from Dwight Howard? First, we learned the way he goes about playing basketball in the NBA. From his time in Orlando, we learned that a good coach was needed to make the most out of him. In LA, we learned that he may not be cut for superstardom from his mentality. And in Houston, all we needed to know, it was all about him at the end of the day with his touches and not serving a role to the team for the future success of the franchise. And he was wanting more touches in Houston overall, which caused them to leave due to him being unhappy with the team, or at least being a major reason for him leaving and not taking his player option with Houston.
Despite the reports about Dwight Howard being unhappy in Houston, sources are telling ESPN.com's Calvin Watkins that Howard has not expressed a desire to get traded, but that doesn't mean he'll opt in to the rest of his current deal with the Rockets. Howard has a player option for next season at $23.2 million. The team expects him to become a free agent and take advantage of the salary cap that is projected to expand. Howard told USA Today Sports that he wants things to work in Houston. Stephen A., how's this going to end?
Can't rule out anything right now. The reason I say that is because obviously when he negotiated this deal and had to opt out after 3 years, all the noise that was being made about him passing up on $118 million to take $30 million less from Houston was a bit much ado about nothing, because they knew that the TV deal was coming up. They knew he'd be in a position to get an exorbitant amount of dollars to make up for what he gave up over the first 3 years had he remained in L.A., and that would be that. But I think the thing you have to be concerned about now with Dwight Howard in Houston is the fact that, you know, even though I don't think that he's been a distraction in terms of being a malcontent and complaining, I don't think that he is as happy as he expected to be. Skip Bayless, right now, Trevor Ariza is attempting more shots per game than Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard is attempting 8 shots per game. Trevor Ariza is shooting 10 times a game. When Dwight Howard came to Houston, the belief was it would be a 1-2 punch with him and James Harden. When Dwight Howard elected to go to Houston, his whole mentality was that I got a young dude like James Harden to play with me for years to come, as opposed to an aging dude in Kobe Bryant who will be departing. So he looked at all of those things, and that had a lot to do with him selecting to go to Houston, along with Kevin McHale being the coach, Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon helping to coach him, combining with one another to help improve his skills as a legitimate big man, bona fide big man in the post in this game. None of those things have materialized. And I think that with Dwight Howard, money is definitely important to him. We're not going to deny that. But he's one of those guys. His happiness matters. And if he's not happy anywhere, he'll want to go elsewhere. That's how he is. That is how he is built. So I don't know what's going on in Houston. I haven't checked, to be quite honest with you. Haven't been that interested in it. They're 2 games under 500. They're the 7th seed in the playoffs right now, and the playoffs would begin today. In the Western Conference, they would be going up against San Antonio in the first round, which means they would lose. But in the end, what it comes down to is that they need to pay attention to this, because it's not just about money. Dwight Howard is the kind of dude, if he is unhappy, he will jump ship. It's all a matter of what's true and what's false. Is he happy or not? But if he is unhappy, he will leave.
So now, as a 12-year veteran and soon to turn 31, speculation around the league for Dwight went from someone who could provide to a championship team, as he tried to do in 3 separate instances, to a player with a lot of talent, but now you have to deal with his diva side that brings in media watchers looking for a story, as when Dwight Howard is unhappy, he will speak out. And at the same time, we also have to try to understand, is Dwight Howard someone that organizations even want on their team to be a vocal point of their team? After his time in Orlando, his perception around the league became worse and worse, and finally, after being an unrestricted free agent once again, this new chapter of Dwight Howard's career will show us all we need to know about what the NBA thinks about him and his impact on the league.
Dwight Howard, 3 years, $70.5 million. The Atlanta-born kid is going back to the ATL. Chris Broussard, Amin Al Hassan here. What can you tell us about the signing?
Well, Dwight was looking for a place where he would be loved. You know, he wants to restore his image. He never really wanted to go back and play in Atlanta, where he's from. But now things have changed, and he looks at it as a way to restore his image, and he knows what he needs to do that is win. And they're not a championship team by any stretch, but with Dwight Howard in the middle, you still got Paul Millsap. Now they're going with Dennis Schroeder at the point guard. You can argue that they could be as good as anybody else in the East outside of Cleveland.
You get the last word.
Yeah, I like the deal. I thought Dwight really, valued the 3rd year, because I thought the average number was a little low, or just a shade over 23. But like Chris said, Dwight's a guy that flourishes off of kind of affection and love and being appreciated. What better place to do that than to go home? I think this is a good deal for him. It's a good deal for Atlanta that definitely had a need for rim protecting big.
I think Chris Broussard and Emmanuel Haas said it best. Dwight Howard didn't necessarily go to the Hawks to win or because he wanted to. He went there because it was his hometown, to rebuild his image and to receive some love from his hometown, and especially to be happy. Which now starts his 3rd chapter for Dwight, which I would like to call Dwight the Wanderer, because this section of Dwight is when he becomes more and more forgotten about and more obscure in the NBA space as he gets older. And once again, I bring up the question, what was it all about for Dwight? Success success in the NBA or just his own well-being? Because, to be quite honest with you, it's kind of hard to get both, which he kind of had in Orlando. I understand trying to find a mix between being happy in your situation and trying to win, but I feel like this was more of a happy in my situation move more than anything. But let's talk about his time in Atlanta, where it would be the last time he'd ever get a big contract with a 3-year, $70 million deal. In Atlanta, he was looking to give Atlanta more of a defensive presence as Al Horford signed with the Boston Celtics that offseason. But if he was upset by his role in Houston, I can only imagine how things were in Atlanta as he go and basically put up very similar stats than he did in his final season in Houston and losing in the first round of the playoffs that year. And then that summer, the Hawks would possibly come to regret their move with Dwight because, well, they traded him.
This is a salary dump trade for the Atlanta Hawks. They get rid of Dwight Howard's contract. He had 2 years and about $47 million left on it. It's not a value trade. They bring back Marco Bellinelli, who's a role-playing bench player, and Miles Plumlee, who has what a lot of people think is a bad contract, 3 years and $37 million. It saves some salary, but doesn't save a lot. It lowers their cap figure by about $5 million. But to me, Lisa, this is the Hawks sending a signal that they are going into a full rebuild mode. And to me, would also imply that Paul Millsap will probably not be back with the organization. There are 3 or 4 teams out there that are willing to give Paul Millsap a max level contract, and sources have told me that the Hawks have already begun getting some feelers on Paul Millsap's sign-in trades. But teams like the Phoenix Suns, Sacramento Kings, Denver Nuggets interested in Paul Millsap. And, you know, this is so interesting, Lisa, because at mid-season, Paul Millsap was put on the trade block, and there was a revolt in the locker room, and Mike Budenholzer, the team president, pushed back against it. They took him off the trade block, and then here we are a few months later. They're probably going to lose Paul Millsap anyway, and Mike Budenholzer is no longer in charge of the team. And so this, to me, indicates the beginning of a pretty significant shift in Atlanta. And it's another thumbs down for Dwight Howard. Considering he gets traded for this, there was also a swap of second-round picks in this deal. The Hawks sending out 31 and getting back pick number 41. The details of this trade, unless there's a second move here that we don't know yet, this is pretty much an indictment on Dwight Howard. This is going to be his 5th team now over the last 4 seasons, and he's basically getting traded for a package of pieces and parts.
And after another middling season with Charlotte comes another trade.
League sources are telling our Adrian Wojnarowski that the Hornets have agreed to trade Dwight Howard to the Nets for Timofey Mozgov, 2 future second-round picks and cash. The move saves the Nets nearly $17 million and creates 2 max salary slots for next year's free agency. Stephen A., what does this trade tell you about Howard?
It tells me that he's irrelevant. It tells me that Dwight Howard probably made the biggest mistake in his life by leaving the Orlando Magic years ago. That's what it tells me. And I'm sad to say that because I like Dwight Howard. I genuinely like him as a person. I think he's a good player. I think he could still make a contribution for a team or whatever. But the Dwight Howard that I knew was Superman. The Dwight Howard that I knew was one of the prolific big men in the game of basketball who didn't worry about trying to score. He didn't mind being a defensive player of the year multiple times by dominating on the defensive end of the floor with rebounding and blocking shots and making his name that way. And I think he had the world at his feet when he was with the Orlando Magic, when he guided them to the finals against Kobe and the Lakers back in 2009. The world was his. But unfortunately, he got caught up in his brand. It was about making money. I can't knock him for that. But basketball, not saying it wasn't important because it's always been important to him, but also maximizing the potential of it on Madison Avenue, per se, or in Tinseltown or anywhere else. At one point in time, that appeared to be just as important. He ultimately went to Houston instead of staying in L.A. We get all of that, and obviously things didn't work out there, and James Harden wanted him out, and it turned out to be the right decision by them because Clint Capella is better for that system than Dwight Howard ever was. But in the end, what it comes down to, Max, is that every time I see Dwight Howard in a different location, I'm saddened because had he stayed in Orlando, none of this would have been the case.
And after getting waived by the Nets, he signs with the Wizards to only play 9 games due to another back issue, and then finally receives his last shot at redemption. A second go around with the Lakers, but this time playing with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, a duo who is looking to win a championship. And Dwight was fully willing to do what was needed to win that championship. Coming off the bench, not even playing 20 minutes a game and averaging 4 points, 7 rebounds, and a block a game, en route of winning an NBA championship in the bubble.
Everybody out there, don't ever give up on your dreams. You can fucking do it. I swear, just keep fighting. I swear to God, don't ever give up on yourself, man. Look at this shit, bro. I'm sorry for cursing all you kids out there. Bro, listen, don't ever give up on yourself, no matter how hard it gets. You already a champ.
But after his championship run with the team, he fully starts to burn out more and more with a 1-year deal on the 76ers, another final contract with the Lakers last year, until we get to the current day where he is playing in Taiwan, being out of the NBA at 36, which sounds fine to me. He's playing an absolutely full NBA career and aged out with plenty of accolades. An NBA championship and a very respected prime in the NBA. But Dwight Howard's name could not die out in peace, as last year his name would come back into the main sphere when the NBA's all-time 75 list came out, where the NBA celebrated who a collective of voters decided was the top 75 players of all time was, and to everyone's surprise, Dwight Howard's name was missing, which became a very debated topic online for many different people.
So LeBron was obviously a part of the NBA 75th anniversary team, but some notable names left off. What was your biggest issue with that list, Perk?
Ooh, Molly, first of all, let me say this.
Okay.
Doing the top 75 list is hard as hell, okay? Because I did one, and it is hard. It took me 6 hours. But I will say this. I am so disappointed at this list because Dwight Howard gets disrespected so much, it's ridiculous, right? We all think about the Dwight Howard, you know, when he played for Charlotte or when he played for Atlanta or towards the end of his career, now that he's been a role player playing for the Lakers. But we forget about that monster that was down there in Orlando. 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, leading the league in blocks damn near every season. 4-time Rebounding Champ. I mean, the guy was averaging 20 and 10. It was at one point when he was in Orlando, it was a discussion. We had a discussion about whether he was the best player in the NBA. And at that time, you had Kobe Bryant, you had LeBron James, you had multiple others, Dwayne Wade, and we were talking about, is Dwight Howard the best player? Now, talking about the top 75 list, if I'm going to add Dwight Howard, who am I taking off?
Okay.
I just don't see how you put Bill Walton on that list before Dwight Howard.
Dwight Howard not being on this list is an indictment of the entire list. If we're throwing guys off because they're unpopular, then someone tell Rick Barry, because he's out too. This is an indictment on the process, and it makes it seem a little too much like the cool kids table at lunch rather than the most prestigious group in NBA.
There may be some sort of conspiracy theory against guys who used to wear the Orlando Magic jersey because Dwight Howard didn't make it either. It's crazy, right?
That's a travesty. And I'm going to say this, you know, Dwight Howard deserves to be on that list. For 8 straight years, that kid was extremely dominant. And I just can't believe some of the guys that I have on the list. I'm looking at like Anthony Davis, no disrespect to Anthony Davis, but before he got to LeBron James and won that championship with the Lakers, I mean, you're trying to tell me if Anthony Davis was to retire right now, he has a better career than Dwight Howard? No.
And it was everywhere. Where is Dwight Howard on the all-time 75 list? Why is there so many unestablished modern players here? Well, to Dwight Howard, it was all about politics and disrespect to himself in his prime. But unfortunately, that's how Dwight's career would end up being concluded as. Not as a guy who won 3 DPOYs in a row and was truly one of the best big men in the league and even battled LeBron James for a chance at a finals bout. No. How everyone remembers Dwight is his downfall during his time in Houston and beyond on irrelevant teams, just putting up stats. But let's talk about it. The perception for Dwight Howard has been completely twisted after his time in Orlando, and we all know it's true. I'll be completely candid though, him leaving Orlando was definitely the worst thing he could possibly ever done, because even though they was coming on hard times with how management was running things, they still wanted him and were trying to make the best out of what they could do with him on the team and as the main guy, the face of the franchise. But there is a part of this that also falls on him for acting hastily on that decision. And due to that, it brought the downfall of his career, going to LA and not meshing with an all-time great in Kobe Bryant, and then going to Houston where he ended up being an afterthought in 2 seasons. There were places that wanted to prioritize him as a player, but he went away from that to end up being a role player rather than the star that he was destined to be for a longer time in the NBA. Just like in my Carmelo retrospective, a rash and hasty decision may have been the downfall of a player and caused their perception as a player to become lower all time than it should be. We can all agree that Dwight Howard did bring that upon himself.
I want you to tell me in as much detail as possible the day that list came out, when you saw what you thought.
I knew I wasn't going to be on it.
Why?
Politics. I already knew. I knew as soon as they made a 75 list, I said, yeah, they ain't going to put me on. They ain't going to put me on the 75 list. I might as well go and forget about it. Yeah.
There was not even a small part of you that felt like you were going to be on it.
I knew that they was not going to put me on that list.
But you do believe you deserve to be on it.
I most definitely should be on that list, but it's okay. It is so okay. I'm not upset about it. I was for probably like 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you know what? Life is great. I'm alive. I'm still playing basketball in my 18th season. Who cares about a list made by people who ain't never bounced a basketball before?
And now, the conclusion. Dwight Howard is currently 37 years old with 0 prospects to bring him back into the NBA, but he's having the time of his life playing basketball in Taiwan, enjoying the culture, and weirdly enough, participating in 3-point contests in that same league. But anyways, Dwight Howard's complete prime in the NBA may have been shorter than expected, but when it comes to his career outlook, we have to remember the good that he brought and how he was at his peak. He'd never truly dropped off as a player until he hit his mid-30s, still being a strong double-double threat every night and still being able to block shots like no other. But due to his hasty decision-making, based more on his emotions, at least as how I see it, he brought his career to a weird place and ended up being less and less relevant in the eyes of GMs and being less valued in the eyes of the media. And with that, losing his spot in the top 75 list, which mainly is media based anyways. But as usual, let me know what you think about Dwight Howard's career as an NBA player and as an athlete in general. Do you think things would have been different for Dwight if he stayed in Orlando, or just went to a team who would have actually prioritized him rather than what he did to himself in his later half of his career? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below, and let's start a conversation on one of the most interesting personalities in basketball in the 2000s and the 2010s. But as usual, I hope you enjoyed today's video and learned something new, as my vision for this channel is to inform and, of course, entertain. Check out my social medias for the inside life of Alvini and other channel news. Check out my Twitch where I stream weekly, and my second channel where I post my highlights from my streams. And lastly, if you want to talk to your boy, there is always my Discord. Links are in the description. But with all that out of the way, this is your boy, Alvini Linguini, saying peace.